Don Eladio, the notorious cartel boss of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad have a sizable cast of charismatic good guys and bad guys who can charm your pants off and blow your skull open at the same time. Lalo Salamanca's, Hank Schrader, Gus Fring, Walter White, they all fit the mold, but the one who really embodies it is none other than cartel boss Don Eladio. Buente, a character so powerful and influential that he has barely appeared in 5 episodes over the course of 2 separate TV shows. And yet his presence looms heavy over both of them once you get to know him. If you were going to die, you'd be dead already. Now step out of the truck, we got things to do. But who exactly is this guy? How did he get where he is today? Is there a real-life inspiration for him? And how does he figure into the wacky Gilligan verse? We're here to answer all those questions and more. This is Don Eladio's origins explored. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You say, muchas gracias.
He's the boss of your boss, Don Eladio. Buente in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Don Eladio is the guy you never see, but the one who's been pulling all the strings all this time. Technically, he's been referred to since Season 1 of Breaking Bad, back when Tuco was planning to abduct Walt and take him across the border to become the cartel's new cook.
For wasting my time.
Hey, come on.
What? You gonna argue? You got something to say?
As later seasons started picking up pace, so did Eladio's ominous presence, and then through his war with Gus. In fact, the first time we see all audio is in a flashback to 1989, in Season 4, Episode 8, Hermanos, which shows us the first encounter Gus has with the man who will become his sworn enemy.
Que es el más sabroso en todo México.
Gracias.
After obtaining a meeting with the cartel's leader by duping his men into trying his product, Gus is introduced to the ruthlessness of the Mexican underworld when Eladio nonchalantly orders one of his men to kill Gus's partner and intimidates him into silence. This entire flashback scene tells you all you need to know about the infamous, also the cartel. When he first enters the screen, he's all smiles and is talking with his new acquaintances as nicely as is worldly possible. He even compliments them on their chicken, telling them it's the best he's ever had, but he swiftly uses his tune and dons the persona of the merciless mob boss when he asks us why he should do business with someone who disrespects him by dealing under his nose. Gus is obviously speechless here. He did not expect to face such pushback, and he even makes the mistake of pointing out the cartel's dependency on Colombian cocaine in what was supposed to be a sales pitch. When audio is pressing us, Max clocks just how dangerous the situation at hand truly is and starts ranting about how Friend's genius will make them millions of dollars. When Hector Salamanca walks up to him and blows his brains into the Don's pool, Bolsa puts Gus down and makes him stare into Max's dead eyes as Eladio informs him that the only reason he is alive is because Eladio knows who he is. But he's got to remember one thing. He is no longer in Chile, which hints that Don Eladio actually knows about Gus's true identity, something not even DEA SAC Hank Schrader or retired Marine Intelligence Officer Mike Ehrmantraut can trace and deduce. Eladio tells Gus he should stick to chicken, but he obviously changes his mind and makes him a cartel affiliate. Because in Season 3, Episode 7, we saw a cartel vote being conducted in yet another flashback scene where Hector Salamanca refuses to vote for Gus's inclusion into cartel business on account of the Grand Generalissimo being a dirty South. This shows that while Eladio gives no quarter to the people who presume to disrespect him and manipulate him into doing business, he also has an eye for moneymakers. Sure, Eladio killed Max and punked guests into holding a lifelong grudge against him, but he also recognized the fact that their chicken joint, Los Palos Hermanos, could become the perfect front for cartel distribution, and so he brought Gus into the fold. Though he never officially made him a part of the cartel, only keeping him on as an associate. In hindsight, this would be his biggest mistake, as Gus patiently nursed his anger and drive for revenge for nearly 2 decades. But Donald Audio wasn't exactly a guy who cared about that kind of thing. As long as the money kept coming, and he was shrewd enough to know that setting those men at each other's throats would end up making him richer, because Don Eladia's next chronological appearance takes place in Better Call Saul Season 3, Episode 4, where he makes his own concerns very Very clear to the audience after taking a dip in his lavish hacienda's pool, Eladio emerges to find Hector standing there with a truck driver and his monthly tribute. Turns out that Don has bought an ice cream factory in Michoacan and an ice cream shop in Albuquerque to ship their product across the border. He even named it after his boss, El Griego Guinidor, aka. The winking Greek. Eladio is amused by Hector's show of respect, and he immediately goes to work on him when Bolsa arrives with a much larger and neater tribute from. Yes, a lot of you knows how much Hector hates Gus. So he toys with him, telling him that he's sick of melting rubber bands and wants all his tributes delivered to him in a neat package henceforth, before putting on the Los Palos Hermanos t-shirt Gus sent him and making his way back into the mansion. His act has the effect he intended for it: emasculate detector in front of a newly acquired subordinate in order to get him to work harder, and it managed to him off enough to try to compete with Gus's distribution, thereby ensuring a win for Eladio, and this trend seems to continue throughout the rest of his appearances. Though you also get a small slice of the kind of behavior that Don really approves of. In Season 5, Episode 10 of Better Call Saul, Lalo Salamanca turns up at the dance hacienda, bearing gifts and a new recruit, and he manages to charm the pants off his boss to the extent that Juan Bolsa is actually worried about him. Hello shows up all smiles and handshakes and flashes a key to his boss, who traces it back to a brand new sports car that gave birth to the iconic Frunk moment. After surveying the gifts his subordinate and brought him, Eladio declares Lalo el hombre and calls his tribute a true display of showmanship, which instantly earns Lalo Eladio's ear the Don. And hears and approves of Nacho's plan to open up new territory north of the border once he surmises that Papa Vargas' baby boy is a businessman, which probably would never have worked if Lalo hadn't put in the groundwork for it beforehand. So you see that while the Don is smart, his priorities open him up to vulnerability. This is proven in the very next season, when Nacho's betrayal is revealed to the cartel and Don puts out a hit on him that sees every person in Chihuahua go after the traitor.
There are good deaths, and there are bad deaths.
Though this is a clear display of Audio's power, it also shows you his faults as a boss, which becomes even clearer in Season 6, Episode 9, when he invites guests to his home alone and interrogates him about the accusations that Don Hector had made against him. If you guys will recall, Gus spent much of Season 6 tracking Lalo in an effort to eliminate him before he exposed Gus's true plan to the cartel. He ends up succeeding in Episode 8 after delivering a lengthy tirade about the cartel's inhumane modus operandi and their self-serving motto. Even calling Eladio nothing but a greasy pimp in Episode 9, Gus refuses to answer Hector's accusations directly. After Juan Bolsa reads out a letter that Hector had dictated to the cousins letter by letter and Donald Audio, instead of picking up on this obvious act of defiance and eliminating frying on the prioritize the evidence of the matter, all of which had already been fabricated. Thanks to Gus and Mike, instead of starting a turf war between Gus and the Salamas, he chooses to appease guests and keep Hector silent because he knows that while Gus is a problem, so are the Salamas.
Y el resto del norte será tuyo. Trabajando.
He gives Gus all the territory north of the border, but tells him that he agrees with what Hector said in his letter. The paraplegic Don asked Eladio to look in Gus's eyes directly because there he would find hate, and Eladio tells him that indeed when he looked into his eyes, he only saw hate. But he then reminds that a little hate is okay as long as he remembers this might have made Gus bold enough to think that he could simply cut out the cartel with a monetary payment, because clearly Eladio prioritizes money over everything else. But that thinking comes back to bite him in Breaking Bad, because as soon as word reaches Eladio that Gus is working with Walter White, the same man who got Tuco killed and is allegedly the world's best meth cook, he not only starts his own lab, but also sets Gaff upon him to show him his place. While the first attack on the Palos Hermanos trucks are foiled by Mike by himself when Gaff shows up to the scene, things take a rather drastic shift in. Down till that point, guesses were with the cartel had been cold, but Gaff showed up alone for a meeting where Gus believed he would be meeting all the cartel dons, and then straight up spat on Gus's offer to get out of the cartel in exchange for $50 million by reminding him who owns him in the first place, and he double S down on this warning by sniping through the skulls of Gus's henchmen, forcing him to come to Juarez and give up his chemist. At the party where Jesse officially becomes cartel property, Eladio thinks he is reconciling with Gus, when the latter brings him Zafra, Nijo, and it even appears to not be poisoned. He tells us that he had to spank him because every 20 years he forgets his place, But then Don Eladio ends up paying the price for all of his hubris and short-sightedness. When the poison finally kicks in and he dies, drowning in his own pool, the last time we see the cartel billionaire is on Gus's case file as Hank Schrader briefs team on the biggest meth kingpin that the United States has ever seen, and thus ends the tale of Donald Eladio the Shrewd, cartel boss whose obsession with money and women ended up taking his own life. Now that we have recapped Eladio's life in the series for you, let's take a look at his background, shall we? Hello. Analyzing Don Eladio's background and symbolism. Breaking down real-life influences on the character. Literally nothing is known about Don Eladio's background, and that is fine with us because in real life you would not expect to know all the details about the life of a cartel boss. If you did, you were either a member of the cartel or a dead man. There's no two ways about it, which is why Eladio works as well as he does. Honestly, he appears in 5 episodes but manages to steal the show in each one of them thanks to his natural charisma. But here's the thing. Charisma alone didn't make him the Don that took years of blood sweat. In body part, based on the clues we get from the dialogue of both shows, it's safe to assume that Eladio started off the cartel alongside Hector and Bolsa as his left and right hands respectively. They began smuggling Colombian cocaine across the border into the United States, and that is how the cartel operated for many years before deciding to switch to Gus's proposal of cooking meth, but they didn't do it because they respect. Then they did it after they found out he was doing it under their noses. Eladio generally possesses much more intelligence than any of his underlings because he knew of Gus's identity when it is practically impossible to know who he was before 1986. And while Boza and Hector knew too, Eladio successfully leveraged it into making guests work for him because if Gus was connected to the Pinochet regime, as we have speculated in our Gus Fring Origins video, which you should. Also check out, then Eladio struck the political goldmine with him turning in a general of one of the worst dictatorships in Latin American history. Has to be worth some political clout, and it appears that Eladio was well aware of this prospect. His only true Achilles heel was his pimp lifestyle and the money needed to keep it up because at Eladio taking his mind off the material pleasures of life. He would have seen the betrayal that was brewing right under his nose for 20 years and like a tenth of the time Hector knew it all along for Christ's sake. So Eladio is more of a peacock than an egg. Still in that context is his feathers are more for show by the time Breaking Bad rolled around than for hunting, but that doesn't mean he isn't just as ruthless as the cartel bosses you hear of in the news, and it seems like Eladio himself is a composite sketch of multiple leaders of the real-life Juarez cartel. Given the fact that he started off the cartel by smuggling in Colombian cocaine, it's quite possible that Don Eladio's early years are allegorical to the reign of Pablo Acosta Villarreal, who was known as the Ojinaga Fox. Acosta was involved with narcotics smuggling at the U.S.-Mexico border, or to such an extent that at the height of his power he controlled all crime across a 200-mile stretch of the shared border, and nothing went down without his permission or knowledge. Though he started off his criminal career with cannabis and heroin towards the end of his lifetime, Acosta began smuggling Colombian cocaine to the U.S. and was purportedly shipping 60 tons of the product for the Colombians, before he was killed in a cross-border raid by the Mexican Federal Police and the FBI in 1980. Even after which power passed on to Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, the new boss of the Juarez cartel, only got to savor his power for 4 years as he was assassinated by his own right-hand man, whose family replaced him as the new leaders of the cartel. Amado Carrillo Fuentes held the leadership of the Juarez cartel about as long as his predecessor, but arguably took them to far greater success than any who came before him. Fuentes came to be known as the Lord of the Skies for the insane amounts of cocaine he smuggled into the U.S., using his political contacts and the absolutely massive fleet of jets he had access to. As a result, it is estimated that at one point, Fuentes had $25 billion as his personal asset base, and that is a frankly ridiculous amount of money for the 90s. He ended up losing his life due to a botched plastic surgery, after which control of the cartel went to his brother Vicente, who was also known as the Viceroy. Don Eladio is a composite of these two powerful cartel leaders in two different ways. The parallels between Tim and Pablo Acosta are pretty clear as they both began their criminal empire by smuggling Colombian drugs into the U.S. The parallels between Donadio and Amado Carrillo Fuentes? Beyond their similar surnames, but for this we have to dive into some symbolism and deduction work. Remember Donel? Adios nickname. He was called the Winking Greek. Now, while this could just be for the Greek god physique he thinks he possesses, But there is another possible implication to this nickname. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was called the Lord of the Skies. And who happens to hold that title in Greek mythology? If your answer is not Zeus, then you need to go watch our All Gods that appeared in Thor, Love and Thunder video to brush up your memory, but if it was then, points to you. The king of Olympus is called the Lord of the Skies, and as far as we could tell, there was absolutely no reason for Hector to call Eladio the Winking Greek. If it isn't in this context, the Winking Greek should just be Vince Gilligan's way of alluding to the real-life inspiration behind Donald Audio's character. There's another interesting fact about Donell Audio's fondness for tequila. That is, that his namesake is actually the son of the father of tequila, Don Eladio. Saza took his father's tequila brand to new heights during his own lifetime and made Saza Tequila a globally renowned name. It is also so very likely the late Mr. Salsa served as the inspiration behind Vince Gilligan's mob boss and his favorite alcoholic beverage. So you could see how Eladio is a mix of multiple concepts and identities all woven into each other so intricately that literally everything he does has meaning to it. And really, no one could have played the character better than Stephen Bauer, who has a penchant for performing in crime dramas. Bauer has also worked alongside at least 2 cast members of the Breaking Bad family, Mark Margolis and Scarface and Jonathan Banks and Wise Guys, both of which served as the inspirations for the aesthetic and the tone of.
Cuando te miré los ojos,
No other character in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul has managed to endear themselves to the audience with such minimal screen time as Donald Audio has. This isn't to say we don't like the cameo performances delivered by the likes of Bill Burr and Danny Trejo and Larry Hankin and Jim Beaver. Vince Gilligan's entire cast is filled with stellar years, but none of them leave quite the lasting impression that Eladio does. He is the boss, and he will remind you that he is the boss and give no quarter in reinforcing his own status. Don Eladio Puente is the embodiment of the less is more ideology because with less than 10 scenes he has managed to make himself one of the best supporting characters in TV history. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, take care. We will see you soon. Thank you for watching.